Cordier. Welcome to Montgomery Week in Review. The public schools in Montgomery County have changed a great deal in the last 30 years, reflecting the changes in the population in the county. These changes present new problems to the system as well as many opportunities. Shirley Brandman, who has commented on education issues for this program, has some thoughts. The Beacon newspaper always contains stories on a variety of subjects, but the financial articles are interesting. The June issue has several important stories about money. Stuart Rosenthal, the publisher and editor of the newspaper, will share them with us. A large number of immigrants in our county have been here for many years, raising their families and contributing to the general wealth and strength of the county. Tufail Ahmad, an immigrant who has been a citizen of this county for 46 years, will share his insights. People with a passion to create change in a community need to know that perseverance and dedication over a number of years can pay off. The dangers of synthetic turf and synthetic playgrounds to children has been discussed for a number of years on this show by Diana Conway, who now sees more and more people in Montgomery County acknowledging this danger. She will report on the effort. So Shirley, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be
So
here.
wow, 30 years of changes going in the county and the schools and the population, that's a lot.
It's a lot. So we took a moment to reflect back on what was it like in Montgomery County Public Schools 32 years ago, so going back to 1987. Obviously, there were many fewer students, although interestingly, we were already the 20th largest school district in the country. To compare, we're now the 14th largest.
That's amazing. I remember I graduated in 86.
Yeah.
And I remember I was one of, I think, 10 or 15 kids in the entire school, public school, who were Hispanic.
Right, so that's one of the other very significant differences is that now we know that our largest growing segment of our population, if we look at the elementary level K-3, are our Latino students. And it was a very different demographic then. But interestingly, if you go back to the minutes of the Board of Education from that time, they were already discussing and focusing on improving outcomes for minority students. So there was growing awareness even as the numbers were starting to sort of inch up. For those of you who are steeped in Montgomery County politics, the chair of the Board of Education back in 1987 was our own Marilyn Praisner, who served very ably on the Board of Education,
Wow.
then went on to
the
serve in the
council.
county council, and she was an incredibly effective and dedicated leader. And the superintendent at the time was Harry Pitt, who served 5 years, and that was considered a very long tenure for a superintendent. We've actually had in Montgomery County the fortune to have longer serving superintendents because it takes a while for a district to really follow through on any kind of commitment. The challenge that they faced at the time was convincing the county council to invest more heavily in education, which sounds totally familiar. I feel like that's
I don't think anything has changed.
It's funny. So it was a watershed year apparently in 1986 to 87 because the county council's budget broke $1 billion.
Wow.
Now we spend twice that much on our school system. But it was the beginning of an effort to really say how much the county needed to invest in education, and they were inching toward that mark that we now live by, which is roughly half the county's resources going to educate the future.
And was the proportion of dollars per pupil spent, was it similar to what we've got now? Do you remember?
So, that's a really good question. I didn't do the math. So we were roughly at 96,000 students, and we were roughly at $540,000. So we're now roughly 160,000 students and a $2 billion budget.
Yeah.
So I would guess we're actually spending more because when you think about some of the demands, teacher training, smaller class size, technology. Right. There's a lot that we think about in education now that we see as that we need to make our students ready for the future that are very different. We've moved towards a much more individualized focus, not so much back in the day of all the little neat rows facing the teacher in the front of the classroom.
And is there a way to compare sort of what was identified then, in those 30 years ago, as the achievement gap, compared to what the achievement gap is now for similar demographics?
So it's a little bit hard to compare because our poverty numbers have grown tremendously.
Right.
And so now we really look at the opportunity gaps. We really are informed by the farms rate, the students who are eligible for free and reduced meals. And in fact, the school system right now has put out their equity accountability model where they have started to break down the data to look at African American students in farms, Latino students in farms, and really think differently. We weren't looking at it quite that deeply at the time. We were just still at the level that I think the whole country was at, which is recognizing that we were seeing gaps for African American students that we didn't want to see. And interestingly, their conversations about improving outcomes also looked inward at affirmative action for their own employees. Very similar conversations we have now to wanting to make sure students see role models, see in their leaders, see themselves for the purposes of their aspiration.
And how would you compare, I mean, I know right now the school board is going through the contortions of having a conversation on desegregating schools again.
Yes.
How would you compare the levels of segregation then to now?
So they had come out, so by the 1980s, they had come out of some of the deep churning that was a little bit earlier in terms of really struggling with the segregated schools. Right. The tools that they used were to try to find ways to voluntarily get people in the community to mix up, so that some of our magnet programs, some of our consortiums, those were the kinds of efforts that over time moved us in that direction. But it had so much to do with housing patterns and growth. And it was an interesting period because what was very different 30 years ago than now is that we were actually closing schools. We were seeing decline in enrollment. We were taking a lot of schools offline, and we were making some decisions to actually sell them and part with them, not necessarily looking far enough into the future. And then we've had struggles later on to try to bring those schools back and to see
So
those
with the
as
last
community
30
resources.
seconds that we have,
Yes.
what are the things that are the primary focus now?
Yeah. Well, so interestingly, I would say one thing to note is that it was the year that they approved AP Government as one of the courses for the curriculum. And it's interesting to think about over the long haul how our views of training citizen and citizen engagement have changed, and I know we're going to talk about that.
Awesome.
They were talking about kindergarten and curriculum and diversity, many of the same issues we talked about.
All right, well, there we have to leave it.
Thank
That's
you.
a lot to put in 6 minutes, but thank you so much.
Pleasure.
And we'll have to keep that conversation going. So, Stuart, money is tight for seniors usually, and their children are all concerned about how their parents are spending their money. Not their parents' money, but their money. So what's the Beacon telling us?
Okay, well, first of all, I want to say, it's been 31 years we've been doing the Beacon. And also, we find the same kinds of topics coming up again and again. These topics are not really new either. But as you say,
Well, congratulations. That is
Thank you.
amazing.
Thank
31
you.
years.
Yes, right. So I'll first start talking about how do you extend your money for as long as you can live. Because we don't know how long we're going to live now. We're living so much longer. We don't know how long our money's going to last. So you want to do everything you can to extend the lifetime of it. So they did some studies, and one of the most interesting things I think is that they've discovered that the most important thing you can do is delay your retirement, even just a few months. If you delay your retirement 6 months and don't claim Social Security and continue to work for that 6 more months, it's as though you saved an additional 1% of your earnings for 30 years.
Oh, wow.
That's very
Huge
significant.
difference.
So we can stop saving now?
No, you got the wrong lesson from that. No, we just have to do everything we can. But of course, this is a really important thing, because when you come to that decision, well, when do I retire? It's very important to look at that. And there's several reasons why that has such impact. One, of course, is you're continuing to earn, so you're continuing to save. The second is you're not claiming Social Security or drawing against it. And that's really significant, because one of the most important things you can do nowadays is delay Social Security. It's like a huge investment in your future.
But how long can you delay
well, I'll
Social
explain
Security?
that. So 62 is the earliest you can claim it. 72 is when it stops changing. But if you claim at 62, you earn like 2/3 less or some huge number less for the rest of your life. It's locked in at a much lower number. If you wait till your retirement age, 66, 67, somewhere around there, you get your standard. If you wait till 70, you get another 9% each year for that you delay claiming it for the rest of your life.
Oh, that's
So,
great.
Stuart, does this inform bigger conversations? There are employers who have mandatory retirements.
Oh, yes.
That's a very good question. I think with the suggestion there would be, you might have to retire from that job, but it doesn't mean you have to retire from the workforce.
Oh, that's interesting.
You can find another job, hopefully. I mean, it's not so easy. You have to, look
So
at
it's
that.
just the delaying and claiming your Social Security. If you
Right.
find other
If you
employment,
can
you can
delay
push
till
that
70.
out.
In fact, some financial planners are even saying you should borrow money in order not to have to claim Social Security until you're 70, because if it's adding 9% a year onto the rest of your life's earnings, and what else can you invest to get 9% nowadays? No, it's a huge thing.
So that's one. What
That's
is
one.
the other financial articles that you have?
Okay. You talked about children
Yes.
wanting to know where they stand.
Yes.
Okay. It's very important to have a talk with your
Yes.
kids. It's very difficult, of course. but several things are important. One is, are they going to stand to inherit money? Is that likely? Or are you going to spend all of your money? Or are you going to need money from them? You know, there are all these possibilities here, and they should know ahead of time. It shouldn't be a shock to them that you say, oh, you know, on your deathbed, oh, by the way, you know, I'm in debt by, whatever, you know. Of course, your debts usually die with you, but there are some debts that don't. So, I mean, if they're going to inherit the house, but the house has a huge mortgage on it, then, you know, you have to take care of that too. So the things to keep in mind, and your kids have the right to know, and you really have to sit down with them and discuss it. And it'll make life so much better for everybody.
Are you familiar with something it's from PBS? It's called Next Avenue. Have you ever seen
Oh, yeah,
that?
yes.
Yeah.
Station.
I find that a very, my dad's in his 80s.
Mm-hmm.
What is Next Avenue?
It's a publication. It's online, I think, only.
It's a website.
By,
and videos and things,
by
right?
PBS. Basically, 4 or 5 bullet points a week with a brief discussion of, and the links to resources of, what should you be thinking about in terms of your aging parents? Or you as an aging parent, what can you do to try to stay vibrant and active, whether it's, you know, chess club or finding new dance clubs, or and also advice about investment and retirement. And
well, it's so interesting. I think people often shy away from these conversations because it's just linked to your own mortality,
yes.
right? That
yes.
to think about passing on is to have conversations, which we don't do, I think, effectively either, planning for our own death. So I wonder, do you have suggestions about, you know, pick a time at Thanksgiving as you're telling stories about your family, think about the future,
Yes,
or
that's one way to do it as well. But also you need to keep in mind, as you sort of remind me, advance directives for your health and your wills. All those things need to be in order, and your kids should know what's going on there too, because you may be suddenly unable to make decisions for yourself anymore. And if they have financial power of attorney, or they have to do a living will for the doctors, and what kind of steps you want taken to keep you alive or not. Those are very important things, and if you don't talk to people about it, it's like you didn't do it. You really have to make sure that it's known.
As giving your kids or whoever the passwords to your account. So
that was last month's Beacon. We had a story about that.
So I'm curious whether attorneys who do wills or estate planners routinely advise people, let's bring your children into this conversation.
Yeah, this article was written by a financial planner doing exactly that, trying to do that. Yeah.
So the article has some recommendations on how to do it?
Exactly, right.
So in the last 20 seconds, any other stories?
Oh, well, we'll just touch on the one of fraud and abuse are rising with older adults. And one of the main reasons is, I didn't notice till we got this story, more than half of all people with Alzheimer's, they aren't told, and their caregivers aren't told they have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's.
Oh, okay. So make sure
people have
knows.
to know what's going on here, because that really affects who you choose for
That's
a caregiver
shocking.
and what they know. I know it's incredible.
Well, on that last thought, everybody, make sure you read the Beacon this month. Okay. We have to take a break and be right back.
Thanks.
It's time to join forces. Get energized and fuel up right. Because starting today, every kid in America has a mission. Bring out the action hero in you. Be part of the greatest action movie ever. The first movie that puts you in the action. Show us how you train and eat like an action hero. Join in at actionheroalliance.com.
Sweetheart, gonna give you a hand?
No thanks, Dad. I got it.
Okay. I'm gonna go fix the lamp in your room.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of children in foster care who will take you just as you are.
The pain will not control us, because arthritis can't beat us if we beat it first. In the fight against arthritis, you need a weapon. What's yours? Visit the Arthritis Foundation at fightarthritispain.org.
The forest is a magical place for your whole family, with animals and fun all around. So discover the forest and explore all the wonder that's there. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a forest near you.
And we're back. So, Tufail Ahmad, I have to tell you, you remind me a lot of my mother. She used to say she lived here in the United States many, many more years than she did in Argentina. And you celebrating 46 years. Yeah. So, tell us about your experience.
Actually, I was born in India and I was educated in India. And after getting my master's degree, I came to Pakistan because I was a Muslim. And I got into the civil service and I served the government of Pakistan for 15 years. Out of that, I served in the United Nations for 4 years, and that brought me to Washington several times in that time. And then I got a job in 1973. Somebody offered me a job to come and work here, so I accepted and I came in this country. Since
So why did you want to come here rather than stay in
because
Pakistan?
I was a new immigrant in Pakistan. Pakistan was a strange country, all provinces there fighting between each other. So I did not feel very comfortable because I had come from India, which was a united country, very nice country. So that is why it encouraged me to come out, and I came out. But it is amazing that I was thinking just now, more than 200 families have migrated from Pakistan to United States since that time. I have so many families all around the country. They all came because of me, because I was the first one to migrate.
You mean 200 of your family members?
Of my connected families.
Oh, that's
Wow.
lovely.
It's amazing.
That's amazing.
You were
And
the
there are-
trailblazer.
Yes, it's unbelievable. And all of them are highly educated people. I got, my children got the best education in this country. It served my purpose. My son went to Harvard. Now his 2 children are going to Harvard this year.
Wow.
One of
Congratulations.
and one of my grandchild is coming back from Germany, from London. He went to Cambridge University for 1 year. He got a scholarship from University of Virginia. So all children are very well educated. They are
So
very
how was your experience in the United States? How
United
did you like
States-
living here?
United States has given us everything, because I have grown, my family has grown here, and at the time when I came here there was nothing. Gettysburg, German town, there was hardly anything, all agricultural farms. And Route 270 was so comfortable. We could walk on 270.
So Tufail, I'm interested when you say how much of your family came. Were you actively involved in bringing people to the United States?
No, not even one. But
Really?
they all came on their own.
And did
When
they come and visit you first, or did they just?
No, not come. They all come. All my sisters, 8 children, they were all settled in London, but they all came to United States after I came here.
Because they saw the opportunity?
Because they saw the opportunities. That's
And
what
does your family talk now about the current climate for immigrants?
Right now it is very bad, but previously we used to talk, visit each other, and they all felt very comfortable. They are all getting their children educated. They are going to Harvard and Berkeley's and everywhere, all my children.
So the kids aren't finding discrimination here?
Not at all, not at all. And because of the Abrahamic faith and the interfaith which is taking place, especially in this county, where the Christian and Jews and Muslims, you will not believe how many marriages are taking place amongst the families. It is unbelievable. So many children, young children, educated children are getting married to interreligious. My own son, eldest son, who went to Harvard, married an African American girl from Harvard. So they both went to Harvard and married.
So it's
and
literally the melting
And it is
pot.
their 2 children who are going to Harvard now. It is amazing.
Yeah.
So when you reflect back on what it was that made you feel welcome, how do you think about what we as a county can do to counteract some of these messages that I think many immigrants get from our federal government?
No, the
And you have a
county
minute.
county has been extremely kind and nice, and Ike Leggett and Mark Edrich, they have been so helpful, because in the last 20 years I left my job and came back and payback time. I'm involved in the community, doing all good work in the community. That is a complaint I have got with other Asian communities, that they are not doing as much as we are doing. And
Well,
this is
in the last 30 seconds that you have, for those other communities, what do you say to them would be something that they could do to become more involved?
I think I wanted to tell them, and I want to tell them now, that they should get involved, because it is only the Jewish community and Christian community who are involved in all the social work which is taking place in the county. But these people are not coming back. They are becoming less and less. So we have to fill up the gap. We have to get involved.
So that's the last word. You guys have to fill the gap.
Yes, fill the gap.
Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
So Diana Conway, thank you for being here, for all your advocacy in all these years. But so how did you get started? I love the story of how you guys got started.
I think like most of us in our path in life, it was a little bit of an accident. It was something that presented itself, and I thought, well, wait a minute. I was a public policy major undergrad, and when my husband and I moved to Montgomery County, we moved into a historic house that we were renovating, and you start learning about park and planning and the county council and the state highway versus the county highway. And then our children started school, and you start learning about the MCPS, and they were in a Chinese immersion program at Potomac Elementary, and so I started learning about advocacy to the school board. Some people still have their kids K through 12 in MCPS schools and don't know there is a school board. So it's very hard to advocate for a program or for your students at any level. So those kinds of things led me sort of accidentally to all kinds of examples where civic activism can really pay off, especially in a community like Montgomery County, which has a fairly open textured government.
Right.
The county council has hearings, you can go, you can testify.
I'm just curious, Diana, so when you were starting out, did you find that you were reaching out to neighbors and talking to others in the community, or were you doing this sort of learning on your own and educating yourself about the paths?
It's a little bit of both. I think you find mentors somewhat by accident. You start taking an interest in an issue and somebody walks up and says, well, you should probably call this council member or talk to that department head. And it just sort of unfolds, which is why sometimes the progress is a little uneven on issues. I think you remember when we were involved in saving the Seven Locks Elementary School that the then county executive wanted to give away for development, and a whole core of perfectly nice PTA activists came together and became serious civic activists at a much broader scale that got into issues of community development, land use, zoning, do we widen that road or don't we? It got much bigger than what it started as, with just working on a school. And the same is true for the synthetic turf
So
issue.
I was going to say that has evolved where that group has pretty much stayed together, the core group of you advocating, and now you're advocating over the issue of the synthetic turf, which has been going on for a few years.
It has been.
So what are the main issues with that?
There are really 5. Synthetic turf looks good, sounds good, seems like a big, good idea to fix the problem of grass fields. They're hot. They go to 180 degrees. That's where Jordan McNair died, the University of Maryland student who collapsed from heat. They're toxic. They have lead and mercury and 11 known carcinogens. They have endocrine disruptors, just a whole toxic stew. So they're hot, they're toxic, they have a very high injury rate. The NFL just did a study on all 32 of its teams for 4 years and found that the foot and ankle injury rate on synthetic turf is literally twice as high as on grass. And those are the best fields that money can buy, literally.
Maintained and the whole bit.
Right.
So
and
they should go back to grass?
If they would maintain the grass, I think in at least 95% of the cases, the grass could take it. That's been the experience of professionals in the field.
I think it's such a powerful example that Diana's offering, because I think, I remember when I was on the school board and there were beginning conversations about the artificial fields. The motivation is to have fields that are more usable, that are going to create more playing time. The recognition is that some of our schools had communities that could afford to keep up the grass and some didn't. So you start with a theory or a proposition that's well-intentioned.
Right.
You'd use the best science you have, but the science catches up. And it is really community activists who bring forward the information. And as you were just saying, I know that there have been some changes in terms of fields not using any of the tire crumb. May not be everything that the activists think it should be, but I think it speaks to the need for there to be education going back and forth between community and elected officials.
Well, it's just amazing to me to think that we're talking about not professional fields, we're talking about school fields and school
Correct.
playgrounds and children, and to have them exposed to, toxic materials so young is just
Every day.
a bit horrifying.
Yes, well, and it's a little bit like lead in school water, which we have addressed at both the state and the local level and the federal level. But I like to say the difference is you can bring your own drink to school, but you're required to go out on the playground every day. And of course, you're required to be at school. So the exposure is essentially required.
Are there studies to see how much this affects the children's blood levels or actual,
There are not
ingestion?
epidemiological studies, which is what you'd have to do because it's unethical to test on children.
I mean, they take their blood sample to check.
Who wants to sign up their kids to be the one that gets the lead exposure?
No. To have them tested to see if they show signs of having been
Yes,
poisoned in some way.
That is a recommendation in national CDC.
Yeah, so are they doing that here?
They are, but how do you decide if it's from the lead paint in your apartment or the lead playground or some other exposure?
Do kids have to chew on it to have this problem?
You can get it through inhalation, ingestion, and dermal uptake. If you've ever done a slide tackle on those synthetic turf fields, you just get a dramatic.
Right.
It shaves your skin off.
Right.
But the main thing is, as you're on a field, the material is aerosolizing, and you're literally, and of course you're running, you're breathing as deeply as you can.
Right.
And
That
you're doing it every day.
horrifying example that you just gave us has to be the last word on that. But I appreciate you bringing this issue
Well, the
to
pitch
the
is to
audience.
just get involved,
Yes.
whether it's voting or
Anything.
your own issue
Anything.
of
So
choice.
you heard it here. Get involved.
Get involved.
Thank you, all of you, for joining me this week, and thank you for joining all of us for this week's edition of Montgomery Week in Review. I'm Mariana Cordier. Please join us next week at the same time.